Welcome to the Thrive Today podcast. I'm Natalie Bourne, the media host for Thrive Today and the founder of Innovation Meets Leadership. We are a platform for women who lead and believe. And today we are joined by our founder, Colleen Rouse. Hello, hello. It's so great to sit down with you. I always love when we do these. So we're going to talk about something that probably trips us up from time to time as leaders, and that's communication. And I want to add the word listening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So this is something that often trips us up. I know that we can either be good at one or the other. We're probably either good at communicating or good at listening. But as we dive in, I want to kind of kick us off and talk a little bit about practical steps, because I think that that is something we all need when it comes to the duality of communication and listening, especially when we talk about creating an open environment where people can actually share feedback with us. And that can be a little challenging sometimes.
It can, but I think the first practical step is what you already talked about, recognizing the duality of it, because you are not an effective communicator if you aren't a good listener. And when we understand the importance of both and developing both skills, by the way, they are skills, we tend to think that listening, some people do it and some people don't, but it is something that we can and must develop.
I can think back to some of my early experiences with leaders, like way back in my 20s. Some were awesome and some were a little more challenging. Like I had the leader that was always texting or typing an email or, multitasking when I was trying to talk to him. And then I sometimes had the leader that would give you their full attention, almost to the point where it was like a little odd, right? Like it feels like there's all these different methods or ways. What have you found are some of the things that are critical as a leader to think about?
Well, it's interesting you bring this up because what comes to mind immediately is this one particular leader. I had a lot of respect for him. He was very instrumental in my husband and my life. But trying to have a conversation with him, he'd ask you a question. And as you are halfway through answering it, his eyes are darting around the room. And that was the most awkward thing. And I remember the way that landed with me. And I thought, what, I'm going to take this and remember this because I don't ever want to present the same experience to another individual. And so I think learning from what it feels like when it's happening to you is instrumental to us. And it's not just about avoid being like someone, but remembering how that feels and then doing your best to make sure that other people are completely heard. And listening is done with your eyes as much as your ears. So I love that you also pointed out this little awkwardness where somebody is almost staring or gazing into your eyes. I mean, it's good to blink from time to time. It's good to, just nod your head and look down just to break that gaze, because part of communication and being successful of it means you need to read body language. You can tell if you're making somebody nervous. If they change their posture and they cross their arms, and it's not about being defensive, it's about uncomfortable, then there are some things that you are constantly adjusting as the communicator, because the goal is this person or persons in front of me, am I effectively bringing change?
I love that you brought up body language, because I think that is such a big thing in communication. As a matter of fact, I once dealt with somebody who was a yeller, and I noticed that I would bring things and put them in front of us during a meeting, like a laptop or, and the next thing you know, you're just stacking stuff so high, like, hello. But it really reminds you that, if you're reading body language and if you want to be empathetic as a leader and you're looking at those cues, then, hey, if someone is leaned back and they look like you are kind of like a little too much, slow down and maybe take your voice down a few octaves. And so really being empathetic means looking. It means watching. I love that you said it's listening with your eyes as well as your ears.
Yeah, and those are like, you can Google that and read all of the things to look for and what those, because they tend to be universal. The way people are feeling, they have a tell. It's going to show up. And so obviously we're talking about a little more one-on-one or small groups, thousands of people. You can't necessarily read the room. But in those instances, I'm trying to look at their level of engagement, and you can tell if someone has a question that they won't pose. And this is kind of interesting. I find this particularly when I appointed a staff member to a new role. And I think sometimes what comes with it is this I have to prove myself. And these people are the very ones who will not ask questions, even though they need to. So I'm talking to this individual. This has happened a countless times. So I see a pattern and I can see kind of like something wasn't clicking. And so I stopped and I said, tell me if this makes sense to you. Can you just tell me what is it that you just got from what I said? And then there's hesitation, and clearly they were lost as a goose. So those kind of things too, as far as effective communication, is are people really getting what you're saying?
Yeah. I feel like so much of leadership is your ability to read the room, to read emotional cues, to maybe even deliver feedback that is extremely direct, but still delivers the information you need it to deliver without harming or hurting the person. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to leave people better than we found them. But to do that, sometimes we have to deliver hard or very direct feedback. And so even reading the emotional cues in that, slowing down to speed up sometimes. I like how you said, hey, what did you hear me say? And you realized they may not be hearing any, they're so overwhelmed, they may not be hearing anything. And so slowing the conversation down, asking the right questions.
Absolutely. And let's talk about this where you have to be direct. So what I'm not saying is that you constantly, yes, we adapt, but if you're saying something direct to somebody, especially if you're confronting something, you're going to get a reaction from them. So I'm not saying let that get you off your game. You still have to deliver it. Just don't be put off by it. But it depends on the type of relationship you have with this individual. If it's something that's a little more personal, then I think it is appropriate to say, okay, how did that land with you? But if it's something where you just have to communicate this information, then you communicate it and you can stop and let them adjust to it, and then you can keep going. So in that way, you aren't just bombarding them at a point where they're vulnerable. So I think you have to respect people's vulnerability, but I don't think you have to, just for the sake of them, just soft pedal everything, because some things need to be said very directly.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because so much of a leader's effectiveness is in their ability to listen, to empathize, to be able to lean into what staff or their team is saying. And so often it can impact culture, it can impact morale. As a matter of fact, I just did a LinkedIn survey a couple weeks ago and I asked people, what matters to you most? Is it being heard? Is it salary? Is it special benefits and bonuses? And 90 something percent of people said just being heard, feeling like you hear me, feeling like I'm seen, feeling like you understand what I'm saying and where I'm coming from.
Absolutely, because especially with the younger generation, but this is a universal thing because being heard equates to value. And so when we talk about employee retention, one of the things that is so important that causes an employee to stay with an organization is they perceive that they are valued. So when we talk about being heard, it's think about this. Most of the time when someone wants to convey something to you, it's not convenient for you. So first of all, you just accept that. It's never going to be convenient for you, or 99% of the time it won't. And so just be prepared to pivot and say, yeah, exactly. Say, okay, I'm trying to focus on this right now. I do want to hear you. And so can you come back in 10 minutes? Or you just decide as a leader, do I need to just drop everything and listen to them? If you can't drop it, just letting them know, I want to hear you. Can you come back at 2:00? So the first thing you conveyed was value. I want to hear you. Very simple thing. And these are some of those little nuances that make all the difference, because sometimes, okay, here's a little trick, okay, I'm telling on myself. If I've had an employee come and they want to talk to me right then, and I look at them and I can see anger, that's not the best time for them to talk to me. So I have purposely said, I want to hear from you. Come back in an hour. And then when they come back into the room the next time, they've been satisfied that, okay, I'm going to get to talk. Number one, that's helped. but it gives them an opportunity to compose themselves, hopefully pray, and they show up a little differently. So sometimes it's not going to be convenient to you, but also, is it the best time for them? So these are the kind of things, the intuitive ability to read that moment and know what's best for them.
I want to highlight a couple of things you said because I'm thinking about the proverb that talks about how a calm answer kind of turns away. Whew. And that can happen a lot of times. I think the other thing that is so critical in reading body language and understanding is exactly what you said. You also have to know you're in a good state of mind to have the conversation. So being able to get yourself to a good state of mind, I love the way that you handled that of want to have this conversation. Let's schedule it. Let's come back at this time. Part of, I think, where sometimes leaders get it wrong is they are reading the other person, but they're not also reading themselves.
Right.
And they're not looking at their ability to handle the weight of whatever the conversation needs to have. Because as a leader, we can handle it just as poorly as the person that's coming in there upset about something. And so putting yourself in a good state of mind to have the conversation is just as critical.
Yeah. And sometimes you just need to be totally honest. Look, right now, this is you, even if you're partway through this conversation and you make this discovery. Usually, when somebody comes to us in a heated way, we do have some knowledge. We're not totally put off by it, but there are those moments. And if this starts going south, one of the things that I think is important for us to understand, especially in confrontation, you don't need to handle everything. You don't need to solve everything in this one conversation. So getting to the root, when you can see somebody's upset, what is the main thing we need to solve here right now? And these other things, we can have another conversation about some of these other things, because that way it positions you to be in a better place instead of being overwhelmed and having the dump truck dumped on you, right? So I have had times where I've said, okay, hold up. Let's just deal with this one thing right now, because from what I hear, it is this. Is that right? Because, the reason I do that is because when they're just like throwing up, right? When it's in dump truck mode, they don't really know what the main thing is. And so I'm trying to discern and decipher what it is, reflect it back to them and asking them, is this it? Because if we just can find one thing and solve it, we've made progress, even if it's not the main thing. That's right. But this is the job of the leader, to read the moment, to try to discern what is the greatest thing that's troubling them, and let's solve that.
I love that you called it dump truck mode, because that could even be our safe word. Hey, I'm in dump truck mode right now. I realize that. I need to step away for 30 minutes. I'll be back. Like, it's almost like give yourself language, right? That's true. Marriage or 10 there, right? That's some good free advice for you guys. As I think about leadership legacy and I think about, the different roles that I've been in over the years, I've realized more and more that, and it's just this little phrase that I repeat, it's results and relationships. It's not just one or the other. And just like communication and listening, I think people can either be really good at results and terrible at relationships, or they could be really good at relationships, but they don't produce the results. And so much of our walk as a leader is being able to harness both of those things at the same time, which is really, really difficult to do. And it takes, honestly, I believe, a lifetime almost to learn.
It does, but it is doable, because if our daily practice is as a servant leader, we're constantly thinking about the relationship as well as the results. So if we're training ourselves in the day-to-day, then when it comes to confrontational conversations, we are well schooled at considering both. Now, if you only consider that in a moment of a heated conversation, good luck with that. I don't know. You might need some more practice.
I was thinking about, and what immediately came to my mind was I had a boss, this was years ago, and things had gotten so tense on the team that she had a coach and our team had a coach. So we had two coaches. And I remember we went off site to work on the team dynamics, and we were trying to do all these like Patrick Lencioni, tell me, right, which is amazing books, by the way. We both love Patrick, but we were doing all these exercises, but there wasn't safety. And so, it was like, tell me about a hard time that you experienced as a kid? And that's what, the Lencioni question. And I remember being like, okay, I can give a real one, or there is zero trust in this room. I'm going to give a fake one. Not a fake one, but just not go very deep. And there you go. And I remember that ultimately her real kind of motive played out because as we're going throughout the day, at one point she just blurts out, tell me what it's going to take to get this team to produce. And I said, I'm just going to weigh in here for a second. I thought we were talking about our childhood. And so often we can, like, our true colors can shine through in those moments because maybe we as a leader are under pressure. And I don't know all the pressures that she personally was going through, but those pressures can leak into the rest of the world around us, and they can impact the way we show up, the way we lead every day. And so I think that something that I like doing that has helped me is in the morning, I like to kind of take an account. What is pressuring me? What am I concerned about? What are the challenges that I'm worried about that I have to face today? And then inviting God in to help me with those. Because so often I think we can hit the ground running, take the kids to school, do the breakfasts, run out the door, and we forget to invite him into that space to ask those questions. What's really concerning me? And it might be just sitting right underneath the surface. You don't even realize it's there. And then that impacts your leadership. I mean, this woman was a high-level leader. I never would have thought that I would have seen her kind of explode like that. But her frustration eventually won over because she wasn't taking account of what was really going on under the surface.
Yeah, that is so important because what's interesting about the way the brain, the mind function is in the early morning, you're brushing your teeth, you're not thinking about anything necessarily, and all of those unresolved issues can come bubbling up to the surface because they're asking for solutions. And so we can even get ahead of that. I love the proactivity that you're talking about. And this is what a part of my prayer life is, that I consecrate myself to him daily and I remind myself to whom I belong, and then inviting him and his guidance that we are doing this together. And from there, as I dedicate myself to him, my expectation is you're going to help me. And then I ask him it's an introspective point. Search my heart, what's bothering me, what's troubling me, because I can try to figure it out, or I can ask him to reveal it to me. Because what I have found is that when I ask him to reveal it, he shows me things that I had no idea were as immense as they were and impacting me. And so if I'm going to resolve anything, let me resolve the things that he shines the light on and he illuminates in my understanding. And then I'm free from those pressures that you speak of.
I like how you mentioned that because that to me feels like having 100 windows open on your computer and you cannot figure out why your computer's dragging. And you have so much stuff kind of open in the background, and being able to take the time to catalog what's open. Does it need to be open? If it doesn't need to be open, how do I close it so that this isn't something that cycles in the background? I even have to sometimes, this is really weird, I don't know if anyone else does this, but I have to get up in the middle of the night sometimes if something is like keeping me awake, and I have to write it down. And then I say, okay, brain, we got it. Thank you. You can rest now. Like, it's just turn that off. You don't have to remind me all night. And now we're going to rest. And so even just reminding yourself to write it down, put it aside, give it to God, it'll be there tomorrow.
Yes, it will. That's a good technique.
What final thoughts would you have just around some of the tried and true things that maybe you don't even realize you do because you do it so naturally that help you to communicate better, connect better with people? Because you do so much in this space where I feel like when I watch you work, you're just a quick connector. It's just in your nature. But how can some of us, maybe even some introverts over here, how can we kind of learn some things that are just tried and true to connect with people quickly and make sure they feel seen?
Well, I have these priorities in my mind as far as who I'm connecting with. And in some ways, I'm kind of looking for the underdog. I'm looking for the one who's not being noticed, the one whose head is down. And so, because they're the ones that need the attention most. And so just talking to them and making that connection with them, and then watching them come alive. If you want to be incentivized to do something, watch the cause and effect. And so I like to look for those kind of people. And they will respond usually. They'll just brighten up, and now they've lifted their head, and now they're on their way. So that's one person I'm kind of like panning the crowd for, right? The other person is whoever the Spirit of God just draws me to. And so it could be any leader, and just asking them how they are. And I'm sitting in the moment and listening to what they're saying. Now, this is a dual listening skill. You can listen to what the person is saying and what the Holy Spirit is saying. And sometimes he'll just, because my goal is to go around calling out the good in people. So if that's part of my goal for the day, which it is every day, I don't care if it's a cashier, like, what is the good I can call out? So you're intentionally listening for what that is. And then making one statement and watching this conversation evolve from that. So it's not even so much about being an extrovert to me, or maybe I'm just, I take that for granted, but I like the challenge of it. And I have learned along the way how to navigate these conversations. So I don't try to force a conversation if it's not going anywhere. That's where it gets awkward. And it's kind of like, well, nice weather we're having. If that's it, then it's time to leave. So those are some of the things that I do just kind of with intentionality. And from there, you learn how to have a dynamic conversation with people as a result of that.
I love that. I mean, and what that really speaks to me is, be intentional to go out and look for the one, even if it's, I just want to find one person each day I can add value to. I love that. And that we all need that. Everyone needs encouragement. I don't care who it is. Every single person needs to be encouraged.
And it's so fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what do you want to say about what's going on in the world of Thrive today as we kind of close up this segment?
Well, funny, you should ask, because we just found out that something about New Zealand. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, this is really cool. So our podcast is I think it's top 50 for spirituality in New Zealand. Of all my New Zealand girls. Of all places. So that's a really fun. Keep sharing, keep liking, keep subscribing. Please leave a review so that other leaders, Christian leaders who lead and believe like you, can find us, because we want to share the message of hope, of leadership, of community, and of strength with everyone that we can. So I just thought that was really, I'm like, of all the places, we see you, New Zealand. Thanks for joining us. Well, thank you for your time today, ladies, and thank you. This has been awesome. And so as you lead your life, we want you to do it with leadership, community, and strength. Do not forget to thrive. Head over right now to thrivetoday.com. If you're not in community, we want to get you into community. We have coaching, amazing quarterly boxes that come right to your door, and so, so much more. So head over to thrivetoday.com to learn more, and we will see you next time.